topic is animal cruelty, and across the United States and even the world, there are cases of animal abuse. Sadly, it is one of the most common crimes with more than 250,000 cases a year. Different forms of animal abuse, which are considered a felony in multiple countries. What is your definition of animal cruelty, and where do you stand on the subject?
So I think my definition of animal cruelty is doing harm to an animal with no reason for doing it, right? So I think that there are times when we, like I've heard of things on like where people have to kill animals, right? Because they're rabid or because they've injured humans or something like that. But then I think that there is also animal cruelty that happens because people are cruel, right? And there's a difference when the cruelty that happens is in self-defense and when the cruelty that happens is out of meanness of spirit, right? So that's, I think, the difference for me. And I think I stand on the issue, I don't know that a lot of people know this, but I'm vegetarian. I don't eat meat anymore, and a lot of it comes from the fact that I became more educated on topics of animal cruelty and then just like where our food sources come from. So for me, I kind of stand on the pretty conservative side where anytime you're doing harm, it's, in my eyes, animal cruelty.
Okay. Well, I think that animal cruelty, really what it is it's, whether it's any animal, it's putting them intentionally in harm's way. It's, inflicting pain upon them in a way that, like, they shouldn't deserve. And I also think, too, like, it's definitely one of those issues that I'm really passionate about is ending animal cruelty and animal abuse in the United States and worldwide, because I do think it's such a problem.
The first form of animal cruelty we're going to talk about is neglect. So it's the most common form, and it's most common in house pets. It's obvious the signs of neglect are like poor body health, or if they're just chained up all the time and they're not getting attention. So if you see that, you could call 911 or call your local animal shelter. They would be able to get them. So it includes beating, starving animals, which forces them to become desperate and mean and willing to kill or harm other animals in order for the abuse to stop. Have you ever witnessed animal neglect, and why do you think this is the most talked about form of animal abuse?
I grew up in a pretty poor part of Arkansas, South Arkansas, and I think that I probably witnessed animal cruelty, especially neglect, more than a lot of people realize, or at least more than I realized, right? So there were a lot of animals who were never allowed inside. There were a lot of animals that had very little interaction with their humans, and so I think I witnessed it a lot. I've never actually called in animal abuse, because I've never seen, especially not as an adult, I haven't seen anything as significant. What was the second question?
It is, why do you think it is the most commonly known form of animal cruelty?
Probably because it's the one that the most people are guilty of. I think when something is widespread, then it's easy to recognize it. I wonder a lot of times if people actually see neglect as animal cruelty. I do, right? So my dogs live in the house and they're crazy and wild and they get hair everywhere, but I love them so much. And I don't know that other people see kind of their animals as their family.
I think that when people decide to adopt a pet or adopt an animal, they don't really know what they're getting themselves into. They don't realize the amount of care that it takes, the amount of years that you have to spend, and the amount of money. Like, no matter what pet you decide to get, it costs a lot of money to raise them. It's honestly almost like a child, and I think that a lot of times people neglect animals because it's just easier than actually taking care of the pets and treating them like a family member. Just from a personal standpoint, I saw a horse that got out of its enclosure the other day and it was tied up, and I called the local Rogers Police Department and let them know because I wanted to make sure that the animal was being taken care of safely.
So the next subject that we're talking about is animal fighting. So when animals are abused and starved and treated cruelly, they will often turn on humans and animals alike. The fighting of animals is widespread and even considered a celebrated event in different countries. So the only person we're going to talk about is Michael Vick. He was a highly skilled football player, and he went to jail for 1 year for pit bull fighting. He would neglect them, beat them, and starve his dogs, and he would even feed the dogs who lost fights to other dogs to train them to attack. This is terrible and brutal, as most people would think. How do you feel about that, and do you think Michael Vick and other people like him should serve more than 1 year?
I think that it's absolutely heinous to commit a crime like that. I can't imagine the kind of person that you are if you are willing to commit that kind of cruelty to an animal. But then again, I guess there are adults who like beat their children or beat their significant others. So I think that there are some pretty heinous people out there, right? Do I think that he deserved a longer sentence? I don't know, right? I'm not part of the case. I'm not part of the jury. I have to leave that up to the judicial system. But I will say that, you know, if you're willing to commit those kind of crimes to an animal that can't help itself, what are you willing to do? Like, where is your line of morality? And so that, I guess that's the question that comes to mind, is like, where do people draw the line of morality for situations, and how do you develop that sense of morality, right? It's the idea that we should be taking care of the people who need to be taken care of, and if we're not doing that, then I feel like that's more of a comment on our own character than it is a comment on the character of the people that need help. Same with animals, right?
I do. I think that when you are willing to torture an animal for personal gain, you should go to jail. I think that is just like such a cruel and awful thing to put dogs or any animal through. And if you're willing to, you know, put them through that sort of abuse, much like child abuse or anything else, like animals are living things, you should experience severe punishment for that.
The next thing we're going to talk about is unnecessary scientific experiments and demonstrations on animals. The first thing we're going to talk about is cosmetic testing. So like skin cream, lipstick, eye makeup, and shampoo. Makeup industries like Clinique, Bobbi Brown, Mary Kay, La Mer, Origins, Makeup Forever, and Maybelline all test their products on animals. And if your product is sold in China or is made in China, by law, it is tested on animals. If you want to use makeup or products that aren't tested on animals, you can use Kat Von D, Tarte, Urban Decay, Wet n Wild, Lush, and many others if you just do the research. Do you think you have all cruelty-free products, and do you think it is ethical to test things on animals?
I definitely don't have cruelty-free products, right? Because I have never done the research. So I don't eat meat, but I buy products that are used on animals, which I don't think they should be, right? I think that there's a line, like, how do we test these products in a way that's not going to harm anyone or anything? And I don't necessarily know the answers to those questions. Those questions are hard. But maybe I should do some research about what products I can buy from my local stores so that I'm not buying products that are tested on animals.
So I'm actually a really big advocate for being cruelty-free. I use cruelty-free beauty and hair products just in my personal life. I think for me, if I can lessen any harm to an animal, like, that's just one step further towards a better world and like better protection for those animals. If I'm not putting my dollars and cents towards companies who choose to test on animals, then I'm supporting businesses who have the same sort of ethics that I do and who believe the same things that I do when it comes to animal cruelty, which is that animal cruelty and testing of beauty products, cosmetics, medication, things like that on animals, there's not a place for it, especially when there are other alternatives that are safer and more effective.
Do you think you have cruelty-free products?
I do, yeah. So that's one big initiative that I took last year, and I only use cruelty-free hair, beauty, and skin products.
Okay, the next one is chimpanzee experimentation. In the early 1920s, experimenters in the U.S. began purchasing baby chimpanzees who had been kidnapped from their mother chimpanzees, and any other adult chimpanzees who tried to defend their babies were killed. These babies mostly died very young, and they were used for military fighting experiments, infectious disease experiments, and high-velocity seatbelt tests. Chimps are most like us, according to our sources. Numerous studies have shown that even long after they have retired from experimentations, they have different behavior like depression and PTSD. They suffer from symptoms such as social withdrawal, anxiety, and loss of appetite. They pull out their own hair by themselves and pace incessantly. They are given harmful diseases like HIV, hepatitis, cancer, and heart disease, but they are also given terrible living conditions. Small metal cages, kind of like the ones you see in your local animal shelters. And mostly today, universities use these experiments still. How do you feel about this, and do you think people are going about this the right way?
No. I mean, I think we have to, like the golden rule, right? Would you want people to treat you that way? And I think the correct answer is no. Again, I think it's a commentary on our own morality and our own line. There was a time when people, like in Nazi Germany, were doing experimentation on humans that were considered different. Where do we draw the line? If it's okay to do this kind of experimentation on a chimpanzee, is it a short jump between doing it on them and then having those same experimentations done on humans, or maybe on humans who are seen as lesser, right? So I think it's really important that as individuals we look at our own morality and our own compass and say, is this something that I support? I don't think it is. I don't necessarily have a solution though. And so I think the key has to be in finding a better solution. So the way to stop bad things from happening, right, is education. And maybe the way to stop this experimentation on animals is to find a better solution. How can we do this in a different way?
Benefit.
I don't. I think that there are better ways to test those products to see if they're safe and if they're effective. I think that there are a lot of ways that we can use science to our benefit without harming other animals, harming other living beings.
So everyone can do something to contribute. Some are as simple as making a commitment to your own pet. Animals who are found in such neglection usually grow to be aggressive and could be a threat. If you know any breeders who are involved, report this as well. They make profit off of puppies who had victorious dogs, and this is a later life sentence as they're already being pushed into that life. Less demand means less supply. If you witness or hear about animal abuse, animal neglect, or animal fighting, report it to your local state or state police department. You could also contact your animal control agency or the SPCA in Humane Society for an emergency. Call 911. Do you have any final thoughts about animal cruelty?
I think my final thought is to, I read somewhere one time that like our pets like spend their entire lives in our care, looking forward to us coming home, like we are their world. And sometimes when we get busy and when things get overwhelming, I know that I'm guilty of this a lot of times, is that we have to look to them as kind of like we're protecting them, we're taking care of them, we're loving them, and we're the only ones that they have, right? So like my dogs look to me, or my husband or Oliver, and that's the person, they're looking forward to us coming home because they've been waiting on us all day. And so I think if we can learn to practice that kind of love with our own pets and then share that kind of love with other people, we're gonna be moving in the right direction.
No, thank you so much for having me. I'm really passionate about, cruelty-free products and that sort of thing. So I think that if I could provide any information or help to anyone trying to become cruelty-free, that's definitely something that I would love to advocate for.
Thank you.
Thank you.